I never imagined my life would be anything more than scrubbing floors and patching shoes for my daughter with worn-out thread. Every day felt the same. Long hours, little pay, and the constant fear of failing the only person who mattered to me. Then Clara Blackwell, a billionaire heiress with the world at her feet, looked at me as if I was her last resort. She didn't ask for love, only a one-day marriage. A contract worth more than everything I'd ever earned. I said yes, thinking it would change my life. I never knew it would break hers. Before we dive deeper into this extraordinary story of sacrifice, pride, and a billionaire's shattered heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. Stay with us for more powerful stories that will move you, inspire you, and keep you hooked. My name is Daniel Carter, and for most of my life, I've been invisible. People walk past me every day without noticing, their polished shoes tapping across the floors I've just cleaned. To them, I'm just the janitor, another nameless man pushing a mop. But when I go home at night, I'm more than that. I'm a father, a widowed father, raising a teenage daughter who is my entire world. Emily is 16, bright-eyed, and full of dreams far bigger than the walls of our small apartment. She wants to be a teacher, to inspire kids the way her mother once inspired her. But after my wife passed away, everything fell on me. Rent, food, school fees, medical bills. My hands are rough from years of work. My back aches more with every shift. But every time Emily smiles at me, it feels worth it. Still, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't hard. There are nights I skip dinner so she doesn't have to. There are mornings when I stare at the stack of unpaid bills and wonder if I'm failing her. Society doesn't see men like me. We're the shadows keeping the lights on. The ones making sure the glamorous life above us keeps shining. And then there's Clara Blackwell, the billionaire heiress whose name graces magazines, business headlines, and charity galas. To the world, she has it all: beauty, power, and enough wealth to buy anything or anyone she wants. But beneath her diamond necklaces and cold confidence, there's something hollow in her eyes, something restless that no amount of money seems to fill. Our worlds were never meant to collide. She was untouchable, and I was invisible. Yet somehow fate brought her gaze to me, and with it came a proposal that would turn both our lives upside down. It was late, long after most executives had gone home, when I found myself mopping the marble floors outside Clara Blackwell's office. To me, she was just a name on the building, a face in the newspapers. I never expected her to notice me, let alone speak to me. But that night, she did. "Do you love your daughter?" she asked suddenly, her voice cool but oddly fragile. The question caught me off guard. I nodded, unsure why a billionaire heiress cared about my family. She leaned back in her chair and explained her predicament. Rumors in the media questioning her personal life, board members doubting her family values, and a merger on the line that could either make or break her empire. She needed a husband, not for love, but for image. Someone to stand beside her for one day and silence the whispers. Her offer stunned me. $1 million for a one-day marriage. A contract. No intimacy, no strings, just appearances. I laughed at first, thinking it was a cruel joke. But she slid the papers across the desk. Legal documents, all prepared. That million meant freedom. It meant Emily's college tuition, medical security, a chance at a better life than I could ever give with a mop in my hand. But it also meant selling my pride, becoming a prop in someone else's game. I looked at Clara, at the cold mask she wore to hide whatever loneliness lived underneath, and I thought of Emily. In that moment, I swallowed my pride and signed. I told myself it was just one day, but one day was all it took to unravel both our worlds. The next morning, my life changed faster than I could comprehend. One day, I was a janitor, invisible to the world. The next, I was being fitted into a tailored suit worth more than my entire yearly salary. Clara's team of stylists swarmed me, trimming my beard, combing my hair, and teaching me how to stand, smile, and pose as if I belonged in her world of flashing cameras and endless wealth. When I stepped out of the car beside her, the paparazzi lit up the night like 1,000 suns. "Clara Blackwell's mystery husband," the headlines screamed within hours. I was no longer Daniel the janitor. I was Daniel Carter, the man married to a billionaire heiress. Every lens pointed at me. Every whisper dissected my posture, my clothes, even the way I held Clara's hand. But the truth was, I wasn't playing along the way she expected. Clara wanted a puppet, someone to nod, smile, and bow at her command. I wasn't built for that. I didn't know the script, and honestly, I didn't care for it. When a reporter asked how we met, I didn't recite the polished story her PR team had written. Instead, I told them the truth. She noticed me when no one else did. That honesty made Clara furious. Behind closed doors, she glared at me with icy frustration. "Do you realize what you've done?" she hissed. "You're supposed to follow the narrative." I shrugged, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I'm not a man who lies well, Miss Blackwell. You paid for a husband, not an actor." Her jaw tightened, but for the first time, I saw something crack in her facade. It wasn't just anger, it was fear. The more time we spent together, the more our worlds collided. At charity dinners, she dazzled with rehearsed charm while I clumsily navigated silverware and speeches. Yet guests laughed at my plain honesty, while Clara's carefully sculpted persona seemed hollow. At photo shoots, when she posed like a statue, I would whisper something about Emily, about real life, and I'd catch a flicker of something human in her eyes. I began to notice things others missed, how she never ate during these grand events, sipping only champagne, how she lingered at the edge of the ballroom after everyone left, as if afraid to go home to an empty mansion, how her laughter sounded rehearsed, a sound she had perfected but never felt. One night, as we drove back from a gala, she broke her silence. "Do you know why I chose you, Daniel? Out of all the men I could have hired?" I shook my head. "Because you didn't look at me like the others do. You didn't see a billionaire or a prize. You just saw me, and that terrified me." Her voice cracked slightly, and I realized the woman who commanded empires was, deep down, painfully alone. The tension between us was no longer just business. For every sharp word she threw at me, there was a softer silence afterward. For every time she tried to control me, I saw her breaking free of her own prison. And for every staged smile we gave the cameras, I felt something real stirring beneath the act. I had agreed to this marriage for Emily's future. But slowly, I began to realize that Clara Blackwell wasn't just using me for her survival. She was unknowingly relying on me to remind her how to live. The gala was Clara's battlefield, and tonight she intended to win. It was the biggest event of the year. Politicians, investors, media moguls, all gathered under chandeliers that glittered like captured stars. I walked in beside her, hand in hand, cameras flashing as though every step we took was worth a fortune, but I could feel it. Clara was different that night. Her grip was firm, her smile sharper than usual. She was planning something. When we reached the center of the ballroom, she raised her glass, drawing the room's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice echoing with practiced confidence, "allow me to introduce the man who stole my heart. My husband." "Daniel Carter," applause thundered. But Clara wasn't done. She turned to me with a glint in her eyes that only I recognized. A challenge. "Daniel," she said sweetly, "why don't you tell everyone the story of how a billionaire heiress fell in love with a janitor?" The crowd chuckled politely, waiting for me to stumble, to humiliate myself, to confirm what they believed, that I was nothing more than a prop in her game. Clara expected me to falter, to expose my inadequacy in front of them all. I took a deep breath, feeling every eye on me. I could have lied, could have recited the narrative her PR team drilled into me, but I didn't. Instead, I raised my own glass and spoke from the truth she had never dared to face. She didn't fall in love with me, I began, my voice steady. Not yet. What she did was see me when no one else ever did. And what I saw in her was a woman who, for all her wealth and power, was lonelier than anyone in this room. A hush fell. Clara's confident smile froze. She hides behind numbers, contracts, and headlines, I continued. But behind all that, she's just a person, aching to be seen, aching to be loved not for her empire, but for herself. The ballroom was silent, every guest hanging on my words. Clara's hand trembled slightly as she lowered her glass. Her armor, built from pride and money, cracked in that instant. I turned to her, locking eyes. You thought I sold myself for this marriage. But the truth is, I never belonged to your game. And tonight neither do you. You don't need a janitor to clean your image, Clara. You need someone brave enough to tell you that your heart deserves more than a headline. Gasps rippled through the crowd. For the first time, Clara looked small, human, her pride shattered, her mask gone, and in that vulnerable silence, she realized something she had never considered. Daniel Carter wasn't the one exposed. She was. The ride home from the gala was nothing like the one we'd taken there. No cameras, no laughter, no staged smiles, just silence. Clara sat beside me in the limousine, staring out the window as if the city lights might offer her answers. Her shoulders, usually squared with confidence, slumped under an invisible weight. For the first time since I met her, Clara Blackwell had nothing to say. When we reached her mansion, she didn't bark orders or dismiss me coldly. She simply walked inside, heels clicking softly against the marble floor, and disappeared into the shadows of her room. No good night, no command, just silence. I stood in the grand hallway, surrounded by chandeliers worth more than I'd earn in a lifetime, and yet I felt a strange mix of triumph and unease. I had spoken the truth, not to humiliate her, but because it needed to be said. I had accepted this marriage for Emily's future, for the $1 million that promised to rewrite her life. But somewhere along the way, I realized I'd gained something I hadn't expected. My dignity. My self-respect. I wasn't Clara's puppet. I wasn't a pawn in her corporate game. I was a man who had stared down a room full of billionaires and told them the truth. And for once, the truth hadn't made me invisible. It had made me powerful. But as I stood there, I also couldn't ignore the image of Clara's eyes as I spoke. Eyes that weren't angry, but broken. My words had cut deeper than I intended. They had stripped away the mask she'd worn for years, leaving her exposed in a way money could never protect. Over the next few days, Clara avoided me. Meetings, calls, appearances, she buried herself in work. Yet the silence between us lingered like a storm waiting to break. I overheard whispers from her staff. She skipped meals, canceled interviews, and spent nights pacing her office alone. For someone who had built empires on control, she was unraveling, and I found myself torn. Part of me wanted to walk away, to take the money and go back to Emily, to the simple life we knew. But another part of me couldn't forget the flicker of humanity I'd seen in Clara, the loneliness she tried so hard to bury. I thought of Emily again. What lesson would I give her if I taught her that money was worth more than people? That survival meant silencing truth? No. My daughter deserved a father who could stand tall, not just for her, but for himself. Meanwhile, Clara began questioning everything. She watched the footage of the gala over and over, her own hollow smile staring back at her from the screen. For years, she had lived in a fortress of wealth, convinced that control equaled strength. But Daniel, The janitor she had chosen as a prop had shown her that strength wasn't in power or image. It was in honesty. In vulnerability. Her empire hadn't crumbled, but something inside her had. And as much as she hated it, she realized she needed the man who had dared to see her. Not as Clara Blackwell the billionaire, but as Clara, the woman who had forgotten how to live. The fallout left us both changed. I had walked into this arrangement thinking I was the one being bought. But now I saw the truth. Clara was the one who had been sold, trapped by her own walls, and neither of us would ever be the same again. In the weeks that followed, I returned to something that felt like normal life, but with a heart and mind that had been permanently altered. The money from Clara's contract cleared every debt I had. I paid off the overdue rent, covered Emily's future tuition, and stocked our small kitchen with more food than it had seen in years. For the first time in a long while, I breathed without the weight of tomorrow crushing my chest. But it wasn't just the money that had changed me. It was the realization that I could stand in front of the world, wealthy or poor, powerful or powerless, and still hold on to my dignity. Emily noticed it too. She told me I walked taller, smiled more, and even laughed without the heaviness that used to hang over me. I was still a janitor by trade, but in my daughter's eyes, I was something greater. A man who had stood firm when life tried to buy his soul. As for Clara, our paths drifted apart at first. I assumed that after the gala disaster, she would never want to see me again. But one evening, as I was walking home from work, a sleek black car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down, and there she was, not in a designer gown or behind flashing cameras, but in a simple coat, her hair tied back, her face stripped of the usual armor of makeup and confidence. "Daniel," she said softly, "can we talk?" I hesitated. My instinct was to protect Emily, to shield us both from more of her world's chaos. But there was something in Clara's voice I hadn't heard before. Sincerity. We sat at a quiet cafe, far from her corporate empire and far from my janitor's mop. She didn't bring contracts, lawyers, or bodyguards. She brought herself. "I owe you an apology," she admitted. "I thought I could control everything, my company, my image, even you, but you were the only one who ever stood up to me, and you did it without wanting anything in return." Her eyes glistened, not with practiced tears, but with something raw. "You made me realize I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who only tell me what I want to hear. You were the first person to tell me what I needed to hear." I listened, cautious but open. For the first time, Clara wasn't a billionaire heiress towering over me. She was just a woman, lonely, flawed, and searching for something real. From that day on, things shifted. She didn't sweep me into her world with diamonds and contracts. Instead, she stepped into mine. She visited Emily and me in our small apartment, sitting at our kitchen table and eating the simple meals I cooked. She listened to Emily talk about her dreams of teaching and even volunteered to help her with school projects. It wasn't romance at first. It was something deeper, mutual respect. Clara admired that I refused to bend to her wealth. I admired that she was finally learning to live beyond it. Over time, walls began to crumble. Clara laughed more, genuine laughter, not the polished version she performed at galas. Emily grew fond of her, and I found myself looking forward to her visits, not as a transaction, but as a connection. Slowly, what started as an arrangement built on lies began to grow into something fragile but real. One night, as we walked through the park, Clara paused under the glow of a street lamp. "Do you think people like us could ever belong together?" she asked quietly. I smiled, shaking my head. "I don't know about people like us. I just know about you and me. And if we're honest with each other, then maybe that's enough." For once, she didn't argue. She simply nodded, slipping her hand into mine. Not as part of a deal, not for the cameras, but because she wanted to. And in that small, genuine gesture, I realized something profound. The woman who once tried to buy a husband had finally learned what it meant to find one. 6 months later, the world had all but forgotten the whirlwind story of Clara Blackwell's one-day marriage. The tabloids had moved on to new scandals, and the corporate world buzzed with fresh headlines. For me, life had found a steady rhythm. Emily was thriving in school. Our home was warm and secure, and I no longer woke up every morning dreading the weight of unpaid bills. Yet something unexpected had taken root during those 6 months. Clara. Not the billionaire heiress in glossy magazines, but the woman who now came by on Sundays with books for Emily, who helped cook pasta in my tiny kitchen, who walked with me in silence when words weren't enough. Slowly, our lives intertwined, not through contracts, but through small moments of honesty. But Clara had a world to face, a world that had always defined her by wealth and control. And one evening, she decided it was time to face it differently. She invited me and Emily to a charity gala, the same kind of event where our story had once imploded. I was reluctant, but she insisted. "This time," she said, "it won't be about business. It'll be about truth." The ballroom shimmered with golden light, filled with faces that once laughed at the janitor who dared to stand beside a billionaire. As the evening carried on, Clara took the stage. The crowd hushed, cameras turned, and then she did something no one expected. "6 months ago," she began, her voice clear but tender, "I made a mistake. I thought I could solve my problems with contracts, with money, with control. I asked a man to marry me for one day. Not because of love, but because I was afraid of losing everything I had built." A murmur spread across the room. She smiled faintly, steadying herself. "That man was Daniel Carter, a janitor, a widowed father, a man who had every reason to despise me, and yet he was the only one brave enough to tell me the truth I'd been running from my whole life, that money can't buy love, dignity, or peace." The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward me. Clara's gaze found mine, softer than I'd ever seen it. "Daniel didn't sell himself to me. He saved me from myself. He showed me what it means to be seen, to be loved for who I am, not for what I own." Then, to my shock, she stepped down from the stage and walked directly toward me. In front of hundreds of people, the woman who once wielded power like a sword knelt before me, holding out not a diamond ring, but her trembling hands. "I don't need a contract anymore," she whispered. "I don't need a performance. I just need you. Daniel Carter, will you give me not one day, but the rest of your life?" Gasps rippled through the room. Photographers leaned forward, cameras clicking furiously. My heart pounded, not from the spectacle, but from the raw truth in her words. This wasn't the Clara who had once used me as a pawn. This was the Clara who had learned to live, to love, to let go of pride. I stood, pulling her gently to her feet. "Clara," I said, my voice breaking, "I never wanted your money. I only ever wanted a future for my daughter. But somewhere along the way, you became part of that future. You taught me that even the most broken people can heal if they're brave enough to let someone in. Yes, I'll marry you. For real this time?" Tears glistened in her eyes as the room erupted into applause. Emily rushed to my side, hugging Clara tightly as if she'd been waiting for this moment all along. For once, the cameras didn't matter, the headlines didn't matter. What mattered was the truth, that love had grown from the ashes of pride, contracts, and loneliness. Later that night, away from the lights and applause, we stood in the garden of Clara's mansion, the same place where we had shared our first unspoken connection. She leaned into me, her voice barely a whisper. "You didn't just change my life, Daniel. You gave me one." I held her close, realizing that the woman who once had everything and felt empty now had something real, and the janitor who once had nothing now had everything that mattered. It wasn't wealth that bound us. It wasn't power. It was love, raw, honest, and unbreakable. Love is not a contract, nor is it a transaction. It cannot be bought with wealth, measured in diamonds, or secured with power. True love is earned through respect, sacrifice, and the courage to be honest even when it hurts. Daniel and Clara's story reminds us that pride and loneliness can build walls, but only truth and humility can tear them down. At the end of the day, it wasn't money that saved them. It was the willingness to see each other as they truly were. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Show your support by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and sharing it with someone who still believes in real love. Because stories like these aren't just entertainment. They're reminders that even the most unexpected people can change each other's lives forever.